Hello, welcome to the March 12th, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if we could specify exactly which level of Cubase that you are currently running. Also, if you could indicate, so if you're running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or if you're running other Steinberg programs, we could point that out as well. Also, if you could indicate if you're running version 11, 12, or 13, and which operating system that you're using, that information is always helpful. After the live stream ends, we should several hours after, I'll take a break, have a little dinner, and then come back and we'll do the index for the live stream. So and we should have that pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps, so you could go back and find particular questions and navigate directly to that moment in the live stream. If you wanted to search for topics that have been answered in previous live streams, we could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan for creating that website, which is a wonderful resource. There's over 700 questions that have been asked, so you could use that as a resource. And also, we want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators in the live stream. They're not Steinberg employees. They do this out of the goodness of their hearts and to make it a better community. And we'll give special thanks to Jazz Dude for his efforts with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for Steinberg users. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I am the host for today. I am presenting from the United States, from outside of Washington, D.C. and Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always great to see people from all over the world. I know we have a time zone. We have kind of daylight saving time, so we may be an hour different in the United States versus other countries. So we'll probably have some people coming in at various times. They may be an hour off. So just a heads up for future live streams as well. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we see, okay, Jazz Dude, I had sent some new Project Logical Editor, MIDI Logical Editor files, as well as a PDF of all the master PDF of all the topics that are now on the Cubase Nation Discord. Thanks for uploading those. Okay. So we see Val just says, wow, this feels great. It's only 6 p.m. in Vienna. So everyone get to go to bed in Europe an hour early after watching the live stream. All right, and we have Daniela checking in from Bochum, Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right. We have Jav and Kona just says, hi, Greg, I finally have time to watch the stream, so we're glad that you could make it. We have Nick just saying hello to everyone. All right, we have Music All Day just saying, hey, Greg, and fellow Cubasers. We have Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. We have Pravin Manny from Toronto joining us. We also have Mark Harrington from Toronto as well. See John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We'll see. All right, and we have Luis Nuno Costa checking in from Madeira Island, Portugal. We're looking at going to vacation there. Seems like a beautiful place. See if there's more people logging in. All right, we see Dean Garvey Jazz checking in from California. Thanks for joining us. All right, so Daniela Tocan asks, Greg, will you be at Superbooth in Berlin? So I won't be at Superbooth. Generally, I'm since I work for the U.S. distributor, and we have teams of Steinberg employees obviously employed in Steinberg, so I would love to go to Superbooth. I've heard great things about it, but I'm not sure if people from Steinberg would be there, but if there were, it would probably be people from the German team, so they wouldn't have to fly me out halfway across the world for that. All right, Dean Garvey Jazz says it was nice to meet you at NAMM. Yeah, it was great meeting so many people. All right, and we have Alfred checking in from Lesotho from Spa Recording. All right, one thing I just wanted to touch. We had a question last week, and it was about kind of putting a file in and then moving over the contents, and I had created kind of a macro for it, but I was playing around and came up with a better solution, and there is a Cubase feature that does this already that I just was playing around with. So let's say I want to just simply take this event, put it over this event, and then have those events, have this secondary event move over in time. So if I wanted to come here, we could copy. Let's see if we need to copy this first. All right. And then if we go to range under the edit menu, so ideally what we want to do is to have, we could just say paste time. And now we can see that this event would automatically just move over. So if we had these two overlapping, we could now come over to our edit menu and go to range and choose the paste time, and that will automatically just move those particular events. So let's say if I'm here, I can now just come over here, go to edit to range, and now we could paste time, and that will automatically move that particular event over. So all right, we'll see if we have more questions kind of coming in. All right, so we have Don White just saying good day from Ottawa Valley, Ontario. So we have strong Ontario contingent. All right, Mohammed Salah asks, hello, Mr. Greg. I have a Yamaha PSR A5000. How do I control the EQ and CC messages inside Cubase Pro 13? So the first thing you want to do is make sure that when you, so I'm not sure if the PSR A5000 has knobs on it. Let me just take a quick look on my computer here. Okay, so it doesn't look like there's, let me just look at larger image here. All right, so it doesn't look like there's any, like particular faders on it that transmit MIDI CC. So maybe like, these knobs here, if we look at it, that we could change the values. So, most of them looks like buttons. And as we have buttons, that these buttons can transmit kind of like a note on, note off message, but maybe turn on and off the EQ, but not necessarily change the EQ. So, but if you do come up with something that is where it can change the particular values, you can go to the MIDI remote, and like I have my Chord Nano Control set up here. I'll just put it to an untitled page, and you can make a MIDI remote device of anything that kind of transmits MIDI. And then once we're transmitting MIDI, at this point we could just say, okay, I want this fader to control and I will double click. We can go to like the channel EQ. So I'll open up the channel, and let's go ahead and just say, okay, I want this to change the gain of the EQ. So I'm going to pick up for MIDI remote mapping. So now as we have, I'll adjust the gain here, sorry. So I'll right click in the EQ, and then we'll apply the mapping. And let's say I want to have the frequency pick up. I'm going to move this knob here. We could apply that mapping. And let's say our Q, we want it to have the next knob adjust our Q. So we'll pick up for MIDI remote mapping. So now as we turn on this EQ, we can adjust our gain, the frequency, and our Q. So we could, just come over here. So as soon as we have like this one particular EQ, I'm going to change it from a shelf, let's say, to a parametric. So now I could just take any MIDI message. Again, I could use one fader for cutting the frequency, one for adjusting for cut or boost with the slider, this slider for frequency, and this slider for Q. So you could adjust accordingly like that. So, but it doesn't seem like, there's a lot of sliders or faders on the PSR that can be remapped. And it's not necessarily a limitation in Cubase, but if you have anything that transmits MIDI, we can capture that. All right, we see John Costigan. He's working on, I think, with a Nectar interface as an uninstalled old MIDI interface, but it still appears in the port priorities list at the top of the list. I don't know how to change this. Thank you for help anyway. Okay. So Dalbsky asks, hi Greg, what is the easy way to adjust a volume on an automation track? Thanks again. All right, so if we have an automation track, I'll open up and create an automation track here. There are several ways to adjust the volume. And I'll make the automation track larger here so it's easier to see. Okay, so one is if I wanted to just select the automation points with my selection tool, I could increase or decrease by grabbing the automation from the center. You'll see like a little center point here. So we can raise or lower directly there. We could also just at this point, if we wanted to compress or expand, we could do it like that. If we wanted to tilt, we could come over here and tilt like this. Another method is once you have the automation set, you can just come over here to the automation value, and using the mouse scroll wheel, you could increment and decrement all of the selected values like so. If we wanted to just select a particular range of notes, we could increase or decrease just that range accordingly. And if we wanted to work with the range tool, we could select a range and increase or decrease your automation like that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, we see wonderful to see Michael Pierce on earlier. Wishing everyone's having a great week. All right, we have Uno Memento checking in from Finland. We have Peter Heidebrandt from the Czech Republic. Says there was a question about automation for live playing, for example, for guitar. Is it possible to use transpose for live playing on a specific part? So if we have, let's say if we have a guitar recording So say, just gonna. Okay, so live playing, you want to use transpose for a live playing on a specific part. So I'm not sure if you wanted to do it in real time, like as you're recording, but if that's not the case, what we could do, if we select our guitar part here, so let's say I want to take these two bass parts, or we had these two guitar parts here, so let's just kind of get the tonality of it. So we could listen for it. So if I have these two selected here, so if it's not like during recording, which would probably be strange, but we could come over here and just adjust our, so I'm going to select these events and go to transpose. And we could just transpose for this selected events right there. So we could just select and this way we could have each part do different levels of transposition. So we say, okay, I want this to be -2. I want these two to be -1. And I'll just split here. And let's say right here, we want this to be back to 0. So as we listen to it, so we'll start off with our original key. So this will be 2 semitones down. Then when we get here, this will be 1 semitone. Or that's back to 0. Then I think we're going to go to -1. So at this point, we could just choose different values for transposing. So let me know if that works for you, Peter. Okay, I just see kind of further clarification about, for example, chorus 2 notes lower without using external plugins. Yeah, so just use kind of the transpose functions right there, and I think that'll do the trick. Okay, so we see Mohammed Salah just says I record everything. I control everything like volume and pan filter. So, I'm not sure if there's like a touch screen on the PSR that allows you to transmit MIDI CCs, but like a lot of devices will have faders on it that are kind of really well suited for that. Okay, Jav and Kana asks, I would like to know if there's any issue in updating my operating system in Cubase. My setup is Cubase 13 Pro on MacBook Pro M2 Max, Steinberg UR44, and Mackie Onyx 24. So, I'm not sure which operating system you're going to, but, Cubase works with all the latest operating systems. So if you're looking to go up to Sonoma, you're fine with that. Just the very first instance of Sonoma, which was out for like 2 weeks, had some graphics issues that were resolved in a Sonoma update, but all the current operating systems are fine. All right, great to see Best Korean Jesus on. All right, we see Soren from Sweden on. All right, Chris Johansson asks, hi Greg, is it possible to snap a piece of imported audio to the grid, but the end point of the piece of audio instead of the start of it? All right, so we'll just do a new project, or I'll jump back to a different project. Yeah, so I created a macro for this. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Because when we are snapping, we could override a snap. Okay, so let's say as we are snapping our events to the grid, generally, so we're going to have our snap turned on to letter J. And let's say I want this to snap to the bar. Okay, so I move this to the bar, and I'll just take this out of musical mode, for example. So as we snap, we can snap directly to whatever our grid value is. I'll say beat. So when we do this, it's generally the beginning of the event that snaps. When we go into the sample editor, you have something called the sync point or snap point. So what we could do is we could actually move this snap point to the end of the file, and now as we snap, it's not the beginning that snaps, but it's the end of the file that snaps. So I think I made a macro, and we could show this. Let's come over to key commands. Okay, so we'll just make a new macro here. Just see if it's see if I have it already made. I thought I did, but all right, we'll just make a new one. All right, so we will come over here. Okay, so we're going to go to, I think it's going to be, we'll say locate selection end. Let's add that command. And then we're going to choose snap point to cursor. And add that command. All right, so if we come over here, so I'm going to have this event selected. And right now, the beginning is snapping to our grid of a beat. So now that I run this macro, as we do this, now the end of the event is what's snapping as opposed to the beginning. So you could do it manually. It's just kind of two steps where we could just double click and move the snap point to the end of the event manually, or you could just make this macro, so transport locator to selection end. So again, if we come over here, I want this, I'll reset for now. So right now this is snapping the beginning of the event, and I'll take it out of musical mode so we can see. So again, run this, select the event, run the macro, and now the end of the event is what is snapping as opposed to the start of the event, because we're using the snap point as the basis for that. All right, so you see from inactive user, if I put all my vocals in a bus and then move the fader on an individual track instead of the bus, does this signal that's going into the bus process different because volume is changed? So it could really depend on how it's being routed. So let's just jump back to, and we'll imagine our vocals as being drums in this example. All right, let me just. So, so let's say we are now coming over and I want to take I want to create a drum bus. So I'm just going to add a group channel, and I'm just going to add a group channel without routing it. So let's say if I am now coming over here, I want to select all of my drums. So right now I want the routing to go to like the stereo out, but I want all of my drums to be routed to this group, or all my vocals to the group through ascend. Okay, so if we now look at this, we can say, so I could have my drums through a group here, and depending on what processing is on the group, the amount can change, but you could also switch these to all be pre-fader or post-fader, so that it's not really like, as you increase the gain here, that the fader values won't affect the group routing here. So if you have it as post fader, it won't affect it, but if you have it as pre-fader, post fader will feed that signal into the group. So let's come over here and we'll just solo one particular track. So let's say we'll take our kick, and when we look at our group track here, we can still see that that is going. So as I increase the volume or decrease the volume here, we don't necessarily see that, but now if I switch this to post fader, it's not affecting. So I could send more of it into the group, or if it is set to pre-fader, that this level isn't affecting what's being fed into the group. So it depends on how it's being sent and if you're in pre or post fader. So you can have it do it, and a lot of people will choose to do that intentionally. Other people just want it to be all the same regardless of the faders. So you could have it either way. So all right, so we have we see Benny from Sweden. All right. So we see Swef checking in, viewing from Trinidad and Tobago. It says, when working on automation lane for an instrument, and I hit S, I expect it obviously to solo the instrument I'm working on, but it doesn't any fix. Okay, so let's say, if you're in the automation lane, and let me just check the quick controls. So let me, okay, when we're working on automation lane of an instrument and I hit S, I expect it obviously to solo. So let me just go to an instrument track. I'll just, So I'm not sure if it's like in, right? All right.
What dimension am I in?
Here, I'll just get to a different project here, sorry. Okay, so let's say we have my automation track for the instrument. So now when I hit S here, all right, so we just see when working on automation track of an instrument, I hit S. I expect it to obviously solo the instrument I'm working on, but it doesn't. So let me know if you're doing the instrument, like the automation here, or if you're doing it in the MIDI event, and if you're doing like main volume. So if you're doing all right, so let's say I just want to come here. So we have different audio going on. So if I'm working on, and then I solo. So now we're just soloing the particular track. So let me know like where you're doing the automation, but it seems to kind of be working as expected. I'm not sure if it's all of your different instruments. If you have like 6 instruments in a Hallian Sonic and they're all going to the same bus, then it may not solo. But if you could let me know how the automation, if you're doing in the MIDI editor, SWEF, or if you're doing it on the project window, that would be helpful. All right, always wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us. All right, reading through comments. So you see from Jav says update to Snowman. I got a little insecure when I got a message saying that my UR44 was not going to be supported in future versions of Mac OS. So I've been updated to OS because of that message. So I think all the drivers are still working in future in the later version. So Sonoma is still supporting UR44. Should I get our audio card? Hopefully not yet. So I believe, I don't have Sonoma, but I've been running my UR. I have a UR22 and a UR24C, and they both are working. So I think you're fine. Always wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you can make it today. Okay, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right. Okay, inactive user says, is there a way to visually hide the automation line on a bus track? So when we add different elements to groups, we can, so I'll show it in, so when we have like our groups that we added, so let's take these tracks, and when we have a group track here, we're going to see the automation lane just appear, so there isn't necessarily a way to hide it. But if you don't want to see it, you could just make the group track really small if you wanted to. But a lot of people, were pleasantly surprised that they don't have to, since the group track doesn't actually contain any media, that the automation is always visible. So, but I don't think that there's a way to hide it, because that's the information that's probably most readily needed on a group track within the project window is the automation. So there isn't a way to hide it. Okay, Swef says, longtime stream lurker. And the second question, if I'm lucky. You can ask as many questions as you want. Okay, and he asks, there's currently no way to get rid of the MIDI editor solo function. It really slows me down. No chance of that option being added. So let's take a look. Just activate this project. So let's say we want to go to this bass part here. We'll come over, and I think if we hide, so if you right click or go to like your settings window, what you could do is, it's going to be under default items, but you could just hide the default items, and then the solo will disappear for you. So we see the solo here. If you hide the default items, then the solo, as we see here in the upper left hand corner, will be hidden. So you can't hide it. All right. All right, we see Michael Teams is distributing his virtual ice cream, which everyone enjoys. And John Koskins says he's sending a hearty handshake to Michael. Where it's 72 degrees in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Yeah, so I heard it's warmer in Minneapolis today than in Jacksonville, Florida, which is kind of interesting. All right, great to see John Barry from the English Riviera. Thanks for joining us. All right. All right, so we see John Barry just says, hi Greg, I got the key switches to change MIDI channel working and selecting color by voice. Sorry, I had an email was blocking. Voice displays this very nicely. Thank you, Steinberg. So that's great. Thanks for letting us know. Okay, we have Eric Sampson says, hi, it's Eric from Paris. Can you please clarify how to control channel strips, VST, VSTI using track focus quick controls, how to smoothly move between track and focus quick controls? Thanks. Okay. So if let me just jump to project here. Okay, so let's say we have our audio track. And we want this to let's go to our channel strip. Okay. Okay, so let's try this with focus quick controls. Let's say if we have this open, okay, so let's say if we want to control like settings on our gate, Okay, so one way that we could do it is just to come over, let's go to our MIDI remote, and we'll have an untitled page here. And I'm going to, let's go to our MIDI mapping. And one of the things that we could do is just set this up for, I want to go to, let's say, my threshold for my gate. So we're going to go to selected track. And let's say the very first thing I want to do on this track is volume, is the primary control. So I'll apply this mapping, and as we look at this track, it's now controlling volume. Let's say the second fader, I want it to be my channel strip. Let's go to the gate, and I want to set this to threshold. So if we want to come over, and we could also just probably right click, and I want this fader to control the threshold on the gate. So now fader 1 is controlling volume, fader 2 is threshold. On the gate, let's say I want my tube compressor, I want ratio set for 3. So at this point we will just say, okay, we want to, or we'll just adjust our input here, and we're going to have that for 3. So we go to our tube compressor, we just pick up from MIDI remote, apply that mapping. Okay, and we'll do one more. Let's say our de-esser, we want to have our frequency adjusted. Okay, so I'll have this as my low frequency. And let's do, let's say, my right frequency. Okay, so I'm going to open up the channel with all the channel settings here visible. Okay, so now I'm adjusting the volume, the threshold on my gate, the input, my low and high frequencies. So once we have something like that set up, we could save this as a mapping page. And then if I wanted to go to set up other parameters, we could just create, when we go to our MIDI remote here, we could create a new mapping page. And so if we wanted to do this, we'll just call this Samson 2. And if I wanted to actually have a button switch between these different mapping pages, I could say, okay, when I hit, I'm in this mapping page, untitled, and now when I hit this particular button, we could go to a different mapping page. So we will come over here and just say, let's get to our mapping page actions. So as we come here, we will say, I want this button to go to, we'll activate, so here's like different mapping pages. So let's say I want to activate and switch it to our focus quick controls with this particular button. So right now I could be in a particular mapping page. So let's say I'm in mixer, or we go back to our untitled. So at this, I could say, okay, we're controlling our parameters. So volume, our channel strips, as we see. And then I could hit a different button and go directly to our So let me just set this up. And as I hit this button, we want to go to our Focus Quick Controls mapping page. So right now we're in Untitled. I'm moving everything on this particular channel. I can now hit a different button, and now I can control all the Focus Quick Controls. And Focus Quick Controls can be set up for, just if you want to go to a particular parameter and say, okay, I want to adjust the panning, we could just come over here and say, okay, we want to pick up for MIDI remote mapping. Or as we come to our plugins, and the Focus Quick Controls are really good for like plugin parameters. So let's say for my quick control settings here, I wanted to load up for my quick controls a preset. So I want it to be like volume and pan. So now when I open up the channel, we could see that these faders are controlling panning, volume, etc. But if we have on this track, let's say a plugin, so we could have our quick controls here. We could go to the channel setting, and if I jump to my Untitled or have a button set to jump to my Untitled page, I could now, when we come over here, we could have this be like our channel strip overview for the track. So we come here, now I can control all of the different parameters. And let's say on this I have a plugin, and since we have Focus Quick Controls, if we have the track selected, it could be working with the track. And if we have an active window, let's say of my VST bass amp on this particular track, at this point we could, once this has remote control focus, we can jump over here, and if we're in Focus Quick Controls, so now I could come over here, adjust the parameters. If the track is selected, now my track quick controls. So Focus Quick Controls allow you to say, okay, I have my track set, I have my plugin selected, and if I wanted to come over and have customized different functions, so I'm just moving kind of these first four faders. Now the plugin is selected, the tracks aren't being selected. With the Focus Quick Controls, I switch the focus to the track. Now we're controlling the track. And if I wanted to go to a button to switch to my Untitled, I can now come over here. And while I'm using kind of the same four parameters, I could adjust that. If I click here, and this is set to Focus Quick Controls, or if I just hit the button, now it's controlling that. So, Focus Quick Controls can switch between the tracks and plugins that are active, and then you could switch to different mapping pages so that those same particular controls can control specific things that you want as well. So even though you may have 8 faders, you could use those 8 faders and buttons in kind of a multitude of different ways. So you can kind of keep your hands there, hit a button, switch to Focus Quick Controls, due to something custom, go to like mapping for this particular plugin, and just kind of go back and keep your hands on the same controller and just go navigate between different mapping pages. So let me know if that makes sense or if it's more confusing. All right, so you see Peter just says, let me clarify the question. I use Cubase for live playing. I use automation to change effects and volume, and I need a pitch shifter without external plugins. Is it possible to transpose for these purposes? Thank you very much. So if you want it to just kind of change the pitch in real time without doing, let's go take a look. I know that there's a plugin in Nuendo. Let me just take a look. So you want it to do just like a real time. Let's see if we can do it in pitch correct. If this would allow us to transpose. So it's just going to be the format, but if you want it as like a real-time effect, there's a plugin in Nuendo called Pitch Driver, which can do it, but that's not inside of Cubase. Let me see if there's, so let's see, maybe if we do it inside of Effects Modulator. I'll just test it on, so if I have this track, I'll just turn the volume down. So say we have just kind of a test tone going on. Let's see if we run it through a FX modulator, we might be able to. Okay. Yeah, so if you just kind of use the FX modulator, so I'll just put this in, so any audio. Sorry, I didn't mean to change. So that's just kind of changing the pitch, and I'll just do it on a full mix so you could hear it as well. So you could automate that plugin change. So if we wanted to listen kind of in context, so we revert this. So let's say as we're playing. So FX modulator. And we go to our pitch shifter. So now we'll go back and just rewind a little bit and we'll listen to it and we should see those changes. So now we're just automating the pitch shifter in the FX modulator plugin. Just so I think you should be able to use that. I'm not sure what it's, let me just see if the master's automation is. But if I just wanted to come here, let's adjust. Make sure I'm running on stereo out. All right, let me just see if we can get this automated. Let me just get to my settings. Okay. But yeah, try with the FX modulator. And it might be that we have to adjust. adjust our detune value. Let me just... But you could definitely have the plugin kind of turning off and on. So try experimenting with the FX modulator, just to pitch and adjust that down, and then you could probably just turn that particular parameter on and off if you want to bypass that effect. So let's say if we're listening to it now, so if we come here, let's go to all right, so now we could just say at this point we want the plugin on or off. And let's see if it... And we're right back to where we were. So you could bypass the plugin turning on and off, if not the parameters. If you can't figure that out, didn't seem like it worked as expected for me. But you could definitely do it with the FX modulator. So give that a try. Sorry for misunderstanding about that, Peter. All right, wonderful to see Tiago on. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. All right, Daniela Tocan says, is there a preference possibility that I could tell Cubase not to use VST3? If not, which version I have to downgrade that there is no VST3 implemented? So if you don't have VST3 plugins, they won't show up. But all of the plugins, so if we go to like your studio, let's say you go to the studio menu to VST plugin manager, you can choose not to have, you can choose to hide plugins that are VST3. So, but you know, they're all the plugins. If you don't want them in, you know, you don't have to run VST3 plugins. But you know, most people would choose to for stability, and I think you have some older hardware for, you know, for compatibility purposes, you might. But you could run VST2 and VST3. So unless you're on Mac OS and you want to run Apple Silicon native. But there isn't a turn off VST3 plugins, but you could not use them and then they won't be used. Okay. So we see from inactive user says, by the way, for anyone who isn't on a Cubase Discord, it's definitely worth a look. There are a lot of nice and helpful people there, so check it out. Yeah. Kudos for everyone who does that. I know Jazz Dude does a lot of work with that. All right, you see Michael Teams is given Best Green Jesus a gallon of pomegranate almond ice cream. That sounds like a great choice. Okay, Michael Pierce wants everyone to slap the like button. Okay, reading through comments. All right, Waveform Multimedia asks, has the generic remote been replaced altogether with a newer system? So no, it hasn't. So if we go to your studio setup, under the studio menu, you still have all the generic remote, and we realize that people had spent countless hours configuring this for systems before Cubase 12. So that is still in there and will be in for a while. So it still says legacy information, but even you know, when people were scared that it was going to be going away, you see that it's still in Cubase 13. So it's still available inside of the program. Okay, so we see SWEF, which just says, for my first question, I meant S on the keyboard. If I'm zoomed in down a long list of automations where a track hit S and nada, I have to scroll up and hit the parent track for the shortcut S to work. Okay, so I think this might have been when, like, if we had a number of different automations going on. Let me just add an audio track. And I'll just automate a bunch of different parameters. So I'll just do some fake automation here quickly. Alright. So I'll just build up a load of different automation parameters. Okay, so now we look at all of our automation here. So let me just reread it again. It says, I meant S on the keyboard. I'd be zoomed down a long list of automations where track hit S and nada. I have to scroll up and hit the parent track for the solo to work. So I guess if we're here in the automation and we want this track to be soloed, all right, so let's say without having to scroll all the way up. Okay, so I think this is a scenario. So if we're here and we have tons of automation going on to hit the S key for solo. So let's see if we can, right, so if we don't want to come over here and hit S for solos, let's see if we can maybe do a project logical editor and for this, out of curiosity. All right, so let's say our container type is track media type equals. So let's set our property here is set to parent. I don't think we need that. Let's just see if we can. Okay, so we have that automation track and we want this track to be soloed. That just soloed everything. All right, so we only want this particular track to be soloed when selecting an automation. So say if we have this selected, we want it to solo. Let me just. And let's see if we. Okay, I'll try a macro here real quick as well. See if we could do this easily. All right, so let's say we want to. All right, let me add this command. All right, let me just see. So that looked like that worked, but let's see if we get all of the automation back to where it was. Okay, let's try this command. Okay, so let's try these three commands here. So let's say if I'm here, we could. Okay, so I'm here. I'll try this one more time. If not, I'll work offline on it. Let's see if we get it. Yeah, I'll work offline on it. I think I know what you want to do, and see if I can come up with a macro or project logical editor preset. But I think we could come up with something. Sorry about that. All right, let me find next question. All right, so you see Best Korean Jesus just says, thank you, Greg, for the reply. We'll share these on the Steinberg forums as well. Thank you so much. All right. So Soren just telling Michael Teams that he loves ice cream. So who doesn't? All right. All right, we see Michael Teams give Agent K 1 gallon of Neapolitan ice cream. All right, so see from Swaff, and for the MIDI editor solo question, I mean being able to disable the functionality of the MIDI editor solo, not to hide it. I'd rather apologize for my poor wording of my questions. Don't worry about it. So let's just... All right, so let's say we have an instrument track. Okay, so let's see if you don't want... So I guess you don't want the solo to work in the MIDI editor. I guess if you don't, if that's the question. So let's check the key commands and see if it's just kind of a generic solo. So I think, you know, like, so even if it's hidden, when you hit S, it solos it, and you don't want that. But I guess, you know, I mean, you could change the key command for solo if you don't want it for the same function on kind of what is actively selected. So if I have these 3 tracks and I hit solo, or if I have this selected. So yes, I don't, you know, I mean, you could change the key command, but let me know if you want it only for soloing into MIDI editors. I'll just check preference, just out of curiosity. Yes, I don't think that there's a preference for that other than the enable solo on selected tracks. Yeah, I don't think that there's a way to decouple that, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Great to see Jan. All right. Okay, Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, see Michael Pierce says sneak out for a little bit. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, how can I create an effect where a mono vocal has one type of reverb plugin only on the right channel and another plugin in the left channel? Okay. So let's say I want to have different reverbs in the left and right channels. So we'll take this, let me go to my sends and kill this. All right, so now we're going to have, let's say, all right, so I'm going to add 2 effects channels. So we'll come over here, I'll just add an effects channel. So let's say I want, I'll just add 2 different references, and we'll put like a long reverb and a short reverb in one. So now that we've added these, okay, I think it's going to be put into my effects channels. All right, so let's say this reverence, I want it to have like a short, we'll say our LA studio, okay? And so we'll say short verb. And let's say we want this reverence to have a long verb, okay? Okay, so let's make this a plate, like a 4-second. Okay, so now if we route these tracks, we're going to take our vocal, and from the vocal itself, as we play, I'm going to take it to 2 sends. So one is we're going to send it to our short verb and to our long verb. And we're going to turn it on. So let's say, I'm on the outside looking in. So there's our short verb, and let's say our long reverb. So now that we have these done, if I wanted to change the panning on those, what we could do is on the sends, we could go to our panning settings. So I want the long reverb in the left and the short reverb on the right. So now as we play, even though it's a mono channel, as we see here. All the lights went out and it got dark. Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? So now if we have, it's only in the left speaker. And let's say this reverb's in the right speaker. Thought I would be. Bring this in. The very last one to leave. So now we're running 2 different reverbs and select the panning, and we could switch to panning or automate the panning. So again, once you load up the 2 effects, route those via effects channels, and then once you load both of those effects channels in, all you got to do is go to the panning, and then you can pan each effects channel independently of each other. And if you go to a different track and you wanted the exact opposite panning, it's no problem. You could just do it like that. Okay, so we see Sweff has whacked the like button, so thank you for that. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already. All right, reading through comments. All right. Okay, so Jav asks, I've been making my own samples with a hand recorder. What is the best way to get them into my projects as if they were like the native sample packs? So when we look at the native sample packs that we see here, you know, we go to these and we see the nice pretty icons. So this kind of indicates that it's going to have all of the meta tagging correctly done. And, you know, so if you're doing your own samples, what I would do is go to the file browser here, you know, copy those recordings into a folder. So let's say, okay, they're going to be in this particular folder. We'll come over to projects and we'll say, okay, let's go to this. And what you can do is right click on it and choose add favorites. So we'll say hand recorder. So this doesn't give you like a pretty icon, unfortunately, but As soon as we come back to, we go home, we can now go to favorites, and now all of our hand recorder files can be accessible right there. So try to go into the file browser, navigate to where the files have been copied to on your hard drive, right click and add to favorites, and then once you're in your MediaBay, you can go home and go straight to favorites and see everything that's in your hand recorder folder. Okay, Balsa asks, hi Greg, can the MIDI notes be used as sidechain triggers? I want to make a rhythm with MIDI notes and use them to open a gate effect on an audio melody. All right, so there's a plugin that's included with Cubase. So we'll come over here to Inserts, to Dynamics, and I think it's called MIDI Gate. Okay, so now all we have to do is let's add a MIDI track, and we're going to send the output of this to the MIDI gate. So we'll say plugins or sidechain. So we'll just say our MIDI gate is right here. So I could take a MIDI track and route it out to the MIDI gate plugin. So let's say I'm just going to now, I press the key down. So what I'm going to do now is just draw in some MIDI notes, and we'll have these kind of synchronized. It doesn't really matter what pitch you have. So let's say I want to draw in maybe on my drum editor. Let's make it, I wanted to do eighth notes here for a particular phrase. So, but you could just kind of come over here and take a MIDI part and route it out to this, and as the vocal is going on, as you hit a MIDI note, I released a note. So if I want to take the piano part here, instead of sending it to the grand, we can send it to the MIDI gate. Or you could just creatively and then, so anytime that you hit a MIDI note, it could open up the gate, or if you want it to be when you release a MIDI note, you could just, it'll play until so you could just kind of come over here, and so just use a MIDI gate, and as you're kind of playing and working with your parts. So let the MIDI note down, release the MIDI note, turn it on. So play with that and you can get all sorts of great creative results, taking one part as the basis for the rhythm of another part. Okay, great to see Kywin Franklin checking in from Florida. Okay, Balsa asks, hi Greg, once I bounce an audio, example drum break, can I just click and drag it to the right panel where the MediaBay and control room is and store and collect any samples in the folder there? So generally we kind of drag out of MediaBay into the project, but anytime that we will record an audio file, so let's say if I come here, let's add an audio track, and we will call this Balsa, let's say. Okay, so I come over here, let's record. You know, based on the path that it's recording into, so now I could come over, let's get to the file browser, and we'll just say, okay, I want to go to my documents, and we'll say projects, and uninvited, it's the name of this project. Go to the audio folder. And then if we just kind of rescan this disk, so like everything that you record will automatically just show up right here. So even if we just go to your MediaBay, so again, I'll just say, let's go to this computer, documents, and we'll say projects. Sorry. All right, so let's say uninvited. And if we wanted to just, you know, rescan the disk if you need to. So, but any of the audio files that we just will have recorded will just show up automatically. So, you know, if you wanted to export those to a particular folder, we can do that. But as we can see, there's the Balsa 01 that was just recorded. So it's automatically stored in MediaBay. So you don't necessarily have to drag it out. It's just going to be put inside of the project folder. So, but you could also just take those. So say I want to take this event, and I think if we go to file to export, and we can say export selected events, that you could choose a file location here, and any file, files that you have selected could automatically be backed up into a particular folder for you as well. So, but realize that the MediaBay is capturing everything that's being recorded, every audio file on your system already. Okay. All right, my chat field jumped. All right. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we have Bob, I guess it's Smith or Smythe. Great to see Broxel checking in from Texas. All right, Kai Wynn Franklin asks, hi Greg, I have a question about the chord track. if I have a scale value in the chord track and I have the MIDI tracks up to use the chord tracks and chords in scale or scale, my notes don't play in scale. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at the chord track here. Okay, so let's say I'm in the key of G major, and I'm going to, let's say, go to this Rhodes part. I'll just do it on a different project here, sorry. To see if it's, okay. Not sure why it's not sounding. All right, so. All right, I'll just do a quick new project. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's add a chord track. Okay, so let's add quick instrument. Okay, so if I have a scale value in a chord track and I have the MIDI track set up to use the chord track, chords in scale or scale, my notes don't play in scale. All right, so it could be, so I'm not sure if you're doing live input or not. So if we had, let's say if I drag these down and we have our chords here, so I will just get a project chord track. So let's say we have, we'll say chords to MIDI. All right, so I have this and I want to put in we'll transpose. Okay, so now we have chords that are kind of incongruent to, so like we're in the key of, transpose it. So let's say I'll take this. All right, let me just get to the chords here to help me. Okay, so let's say our chord track is in the key of D, but our MIDI part is in the key of C. So this is in, our chord track's in D major and our MIDI event is in C major. It says I had the MIDI tracks up to use a chord track, chords in scale or scale. My notes don't play in the scale. So if we look at this, so we can see that we're in the key D major, that's our scale. So if we come over and in the chords we tell it to follow the chord track, and we have chords and scales. So we could choose to follow directly. So there's different options that we see here. So I will go ahead and we'll say follow directly. And we should see always just... Okay, so we're going to first choose to synchronize. So let me just do this. So we should see our C naturals go to C sharps when we come here to chords. And we'll say chords and scale. So we're going to synchronize first. Apply known chord. So let's say we want to do D major. We'll say analyze chords. And now as we've done that, it's now automatically synchronized. So make sure that when you're doing that, once you have that set, initially when you're doing that, so if it's set to off, that you synchronize instead of follow directly. Try to choose synchronize if you have existing data there, and then that will automatically follow the chords as you saw. So let me know if that's what you're doing with that. All right, great to see Sway TV on. Thanks for joining. All right, always great to see Mark Rabin. I know he's missed the last 2 live streams, so we'll give a big woof to Stella, and we'll give special dog treats, some special dog biscuits to Stella, Mark's dog, who's always a loyal attendee as well. All right, so we have a question from Sway TV. If I do not own a physical MIDI controller, can I make a generic remote that I can create to take advantage of the features? So generally, the generic remote is going to take an incoming MIDI message and control something on the screen. So, I'm trying to think how you could use it without you could configure things, and if you want it, I would say it's kind of a stretch to make it work without a MIDI device, but there's lots of devices that you could have that transmit MIDI information, whether it's a tablet, a stream deck, a phone. There's apps that will transmit MIDI notes and and MIDI data, such as MIDI CCs, and those can work, but for the most part it makes sense to have a MIDI control, and even if it's something like a really small, simple, like I have a Korg Nano control on my desk, or I have a Choy Sauce fader box, and those will spit out MIDI information. Different apps can spit out MIDI information, but I would say for the most part, most people using the generic remote will utilize a hardware controller. All right, we see the artist known as Love giving a big woof to Stella. Okay. All right, so we see Swept just says, thanks for fighting the solo thing for me, Greg. Highly appreciate it. I'll see if I can come up with something for Friday's live stream. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to close windows using Escape? Some works with Escape, but some don't. So, some windows will, as you mentioned, will work with Escape. I'm not sure if there's like a particular logic to it. Some, like if we're in a MIDI editor, you could just hit the Enter key. We'll close. Let's see if we have mixer. And some of them, like the mixer, will be the same key to open and close. So it could really depend on the function. So, but I'm not sure if it's a user assignable. Some keys, like the Windows key, is on the Windows systems is kind of set up. But let's see if we could assign a particular. Yeah, so it's not. Some of the keys are kind of out of control for developers, and the Escape, I think, is kind of tied into the Windows operating system, kind of like the Windows key as well. Okay, Michael Team says the like button is lonely. Give it a smash. Okay. And Sweff says if I could hit like more than once, I would. So it's sign in on a different profile, I guess. You could have your significant other hit the like button. Have your parents hit the like button. All right. All right, question from Frank Ronald Olson. I only get one channel on the recorded stereo track. Sometimes I get two. Now I don't get two at all anytime. Why? So it could be like when you record. So let's say if we add a stereo track. So, make sure one that you're recording, as we add an audio track that that you have it configured for stereo. And then as we add an audio track, what can happen sometimes is it could be a stereo configuration, but maybe you only have a mono input instead of a stereo input. So here we could choose whether we want inputs 1 and 2 stereo, or, or if we want it to be mono. So my guess is that maybe you accidentally set the input as a mono and it's waiting for you to choose a stereo input instead, and it may just revert to the previous selection of a mono input instead of a stereo input. So just check the actual audio inputs and make sure that it's stereo or it's stereo, one of your stereo inputs there. And I think that will fix it for you. All right, everyone's happy, according to Mark, with Nick's mixes. It's great. All right, so we see from Pylon Records, hi Greg, I have multi-sampled my old Yamaha DX7. How can I play these samples back in Cubase? Do I need to purchase Halion 7 because Halion Sonic 7, which is in Cubase, is only an instrument player? One of the things that you could do is just simply load it into Groove Agent. Groove Agent is a very capable sampler. So, when we have the sampler track, the sampler track is really intended to work with one particular sound, and then you manipulate that one sound. That's really the intention. But Groove Agent, you could have 128 different pads. You can have 128 different velocity levels. So you can just, treat Groove Agent as your sampler, and do that if you don't have if you don't have a license for Halion 7. So Halion Sonic, as you mentioned, is kind of the playback engine of Halion 7. So a lot of companies will make their instruments in Halion 7 and sell them to Steinberg users as Halion Sonic content. But if you wanted to do it all with built-in tools, just use Groove Agent SE5, and you could just drag and drop all your samples, 32 velocity layers. So it's a very, very capable sampler. So you could just do it all in Groove Agent 5 and then have access to all your DX7s. But if you went out and got the FM7 instrument, so let's come over here, let's add an instrument track, and let's say we can come over here. Let's say we go to FM7. This is sold separately for, I think, $99, or it comes with the full Halion. But at this point, you could have a full FM synth built in. And if we come over to our import, you could actually import all of your sysx files directly from a DX7 right into FM7. So if you haven't done every single patch, this is a great way to get your DX7 libraries into a more contemporary realm using FM7 or FM Lab inside of Halion or Halion Sonic. So, but if you wanted to make your own samples, Groove Agent is really capable of doing that. All right, so we have Spa Dogs checking in from Canada. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Jav and Kona, says, thank you, Greg. So far you've cleared out each and every one of my doubts. Yeah, well, it's great to have you on the live stream. We hope to see you on many more. All right, so we see Swep says, thanks, Greg, for being so responsive. I'll try to figure out the editor solo thing as well. So. All right, so we see Mark Rabin is always so incredibly kind, says listening, but is grateful for all of the Club Cubase attendees. All right, so we see from Jav. Lastly, I would like to know how to work with my friend who's in our city but also works at Cubase 13. Can we have real-time interaction on the same project? I remember it could be done. So there used to be a feature called VST Transit, and that was discontinued in Cubase 13 because it wasn't being utilized by customers. If you want to record each other, remotely, what you could do is just come over and use VST Connect SE. So that will allow you to record one person from a different facility or studio or location into your project. So that works really well. What a lot of people will tend to do is maybe share the projects online, whether it's a Dropbox or utilizing something like WeTransfer. Nuendo does have, it's one of the differences with Nuendo, where it's kind of designed, there's some more features for like facilities, and with that, you could have multiple people running the same project in a network collaboration, but that's not in Cubase. So with Cubase, what a lot of people will tend to do is maybe take the, share the media and then, update the project file and share the project file. So, but there's no kind of direct functionality for that. All right, Michael B asks, is it possible to have a shortcut to change VST audio system? So there isn't. We could get to the studio setup, and if we have the audio system selected, but there isn't necessarily a button to switch between this interface and a different interface and a different interface. So that would have to manually be done. So just, I can see where it could be problematic, like maybe in the middle of a session you may not want to send it accidentally to an audio interface that doesn't exist, just because there's a keyboard shortcut that's referencing it. So that could be problematic for a lot of people. So it could be a type of thing that, you would want to intentionally set by selecting it as a user, so that a user hitting an accidental keyboard shortcut doesn't, doesn't rewire, doesn't reconfigure your entire audio system by accident. All right, so we have day one checking in from Houston, Texas. Thanks for joining us. My brother lives in Houston. All right, Michael B asks, can I change the tempo of multiple files, tracks, MIDI, audio, sometimes overlapping with each other? I want to check what tempo is better, something like faster, slower, playback without any other changes. So as long as all the files are in musical mode, so if I wanted to just take a particular project here, let me just revert this. Okay, so I'm going to select all of the files, and we're going to place these into musical mode from our pool window. So we say we have a steady recording of like 100 beats per minute. So if I come to my tempo, now that all these tracks we know what the tempo is because it's recorded at 100 beats a minute, they're all placed into musical mode. So select all the events, make sure that you have musical mode enabled. And now I could say, okay, let's go to 120. And I can just type it in. Let's try 108. Let's try 88. So we could just kind of audition different tempos without any consequences. So place all in musical mode. Make sure that the files have tempo stamps, and if it's MIDI, it will automatically kind of follow right along with it as well. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. And it just says, hello all, thanks Greg for all the help. So you're welcome. It's a joy to be able to help people. All right, so we just see, please dig a little deeper into the scale assistant. So let's see if I still have that project open. Okay, so let's say if we are here, now there's kind of two different scale assistants. So if we wanted to do, let's say we have our chord track here, we're in the key of D. And if we go into the scale assistant within the MIDI editor, we can see our scale assistant here. So here we could choose our editor scale, or we could choose to use the chord track. So let me just activate this project. So it's looking at the correct chord track. All right, so now we can say we want to use the scale from the chord track. We could have a couple of different things. So one is to snap pitch editing. So let's say, okay, I'm in the key of D major. So now as I move notes, like I can only go from G to A to B. I can't go to B flat. I can't go to A flat. It's only going to allow me to move notes directly to within the scale right here. We could also just say snap live input. So if I wanted to record like a bass line and I just wanted to play something kind of chromatically, so now it's only going to snap those notes directly to the scale. So even if we come back here, and I could just put those notes in, and as we do this, those notes would automatically comply within the scale. We could also choose, when we look at our scale, to say I only want to show pitches with events. So if there's no particular events on those notes, we don't see those notes. We could also choose to show pitches only within the scale assistant. So this way I'm only seeing the notes within D major, or I'm seeing all of the notes. So we could kind of filter the view for being within the key, or being within, or just showing the notes that actually are the events that actually have notes within the project as well. So there's some additional scale editing stuff you could do, but it's like really pretty comprehensive inside of the Cubase key editor. Okay, so you see from Kaiwen Franklin says, I follow the video that Dom Segalis has on YouTube. I'd let her how to use the chord track. Yes, I'm using live input, and I'm playing and trying to keep all my notes in the scale noted in the chord track. So, but also within the editor here, so just so that you know, there is a, snap live input. So, we could do, show note guides on here as well. So we could actually kind of see in the background, particular notes. But you could do the live input directly from here as well. So check see if that makes sense for you, Kai. Paul Claridge asks, Greg, why can't we import arranger track from other track? Could you ask to have this feature added? So, the arranger track could be like very specific to that track. And I know it's not carried over in an import track. So, but let's say if I come and we have an arranger track here in this project, and I have a project with arranger tracks. Let me see if it's still on my recent list. Yeah. So I won't activate this, but if we have our arranger track set up here, that we could copy these events. So I think we could copy, and then we go to the arranger track here, that you could paste those particular arranger track events over. So I'm not sure. So it might be something that's so kind of intrinsically linked to a particular project that it may not make sense to transfer that over, but I'll make sure to mention it again to the team. All right. Aishi Sagawa asks, hi Greg, question about the project cursor position. Up until Cubase 12, using a shortcut would move the cursor to the bar number position, but in Cubase 13, the cursor jumps to the beat position. So in Cubase 13.01, the initial release, it went to the bar, and then 13.02, it went to the beat. I know that the team is aware of it, and I think we'll see a fix maybe in the next maintenance release. So it wasn't necessarily a Cubase 13 thing. Something just happened in the first maintenance release for that. So I think we'll see a resolution to that. All right, and we see just maybe a follow-up to that. I've been using a shortcut for many years, so I prefer the cursor to jump to the bar position as it used to. Is there any way to change this in the preferences or elsewhere? So I think it's just kind of an oversight that was in 13.02, and I think we'll see it resolved in the next update. Question from DJ View. Hello, Greg. I have a question about tuning audio samples. How best to tune audio samples to the key of the song, to chord progressions on a chord track. So if we have a chord track, let's come over here. Let me open up a project. Okay, so we could do it for monophonic sources. So let's say if we're listening to this project, and let's go ahead and just add a chord track. I guess we have one already. Let me just. Okay, so let's say we'll
Do you recall?
Alright, so I'm going to take the guitar part here,
That was a long, long
and we'll make the chords for it.
It was 7th grade.
This may crash my system. Alright, sorry. Let me just do that. Okay. Try this one more time. Sorry about that. We're just going to take the guitar part here. Okay, so we have a chord track. Okay, so let's say I have, so this is really designed to kind of work for monophonic sources. So let's say I just take my chord track, I'll make it, zoom in here. So let's say I'll take the bass part. Alright, so what I want to do is so let's say that F sharp chord there, I'm going to go to the inspector and we're going to tell this track to follow the chords. And we could say let's have it follow, root notes because it's a bass part. Okay, so we'll synchronize this. So it's going to now do its analysis in Variaudio. So let's say I switch this from F sharp major to A major. So, and as we do this, just change my start mode here. Sorry. All right, so but once you do that, then like if we look at our chords, we can see in Variaudio, we'll edit the Variaudio for this. All right. So that as I would change chords here, we could see, so I'm going to just modulate these up or we'll go down from A to G, that those audio notes will follow. So you do it for monophonic audio sources. It's not really designed for like piano, guitar chords, string chords, stuff like that, but you can do it for monophonic stuff quite easily. Okay, so we see Kai Wen Franklin says, Greg, if you click on the MIDI note editor, you'll get a different set of options to use in the track inspector. So I think I covered that already, but let me know, Kai, if I didn't. I know I'm probably about 25 minutes behind. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California. And he had his evil twin hit the like button as well. All right, so we see, is there a way to pinch zoom in the editor audio segments with the MacBook's trackpad as we can do on phones to zoom in on a photo? So, what you can do, if I switch to a trackpad, it's going to mess up the live stream. So I don't think it's kind of set up the same way because not all trackpads work that way, but I think if you just hold down even control with the zoom tool and double click, you could just kind of zoom just on those particular elements quite easily. So it's not the same exact paradigm, but I think it works really well. So try that. All right, so we see John Barry. Hi, Greg. When loading an effects chain preset, I would like to load the same effects chain preset to a number of channels using QLink in the mixer, but it only loads one. Is there a modifier key I need to use? Yeah, so I think that's how it works because it's just for one, but let's take a look. Just do a new project. See if it's going to cooperate or not. It may just force quite a, it may come back, but I don't want to wait so long. Sorry about that. All right. Let's take a look at John's question. So I think that we can maybe do it in a two-step process, so it's maybe not as hateful. Okay, so let me just make sure. I think it's effects chain presets. Yeah. Okay. All right, so I'm going to drag this effects chain preset here. We get to the mix console. We could see that we'll have that. All right, so I think if we right click and copy, so we're going to right click on the options here, copy, and let's select a number of tracks. Let's see, paste, I think we'll do one. Oh, so we can copy and paste across all of them. So let me just undo that in the mix console. So once you drag the effects chain, just right click on the word inserts, copy, select the other tracks here, and then right click on the word inserts and paste. And let me just did do it. All right, let me try it one more time. All right, so effects chain preset channel 1. Okay, copy. I have to rewind and watch what I did. All right, we just. All right, let's try right-click there, paste settings to selected channels. All right, let me just. Let me just reset. Yeah, so if you're just right click to copy and then right click and paste, and all the channels are selected and we don't have to enable Q-Link, then all those can be applied to it like that. So sorry about that, John, but let me know if that's helpful. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we have Jackseed or Jaxt from Norway. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Dan McLean checking in from Toronto. So we have 4 people from Toronto on. All right, so we see Henry Flurry. Hi, Greg. How do I make a chord track trigger an instrument when it passes the chord and not anywhere after? Okay, so let's come over here. I'll add. Okay, so we have, and we'll add a chord track. Okay, so sometimes, see if I'm understanding this right. So let's say we put in C chord, we'll come over into an F chord, and let's say I want no chord, like maybe a drum break, then going to a G chord. So let's say we have something like this, and we have this set up to use monitored tracks. So as we listen to it now, so let's say if we wanted, I think maybe what the question is, like, to not have the chord play Okay, so how can I make the chord track trigger an instrument when it passes a chord and not anywhere after? So if you mean by after, like you don't want it to play here, let me just switch this to, let's just switch this to beat. So let's say I want the chord to stop right there. So we'll say if we just put in a chord with nothing, then it shuts off. So if you put in kind of an empty chord, that will stop the playback of the previous chords. Let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. So again, if we just put in a chord with like an X, that stops a chord playing. So but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we see question. I have an issue where recording MIDI on click turns out 1/32 early. I know I can adjust the timing of playback, but this doesn't move the notes on the grid. Is there a way to delay MIDI recording by 1/32 notes? So one of the things I would check is if you go to your studio setup, and if we see your MIDI port setup, and you may see this on Windows. Let me see if I may have a screenshot of this. It's different on Windows platform. I'm not sure if you're on Windows or Mac. Usually this is a Windows question. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right, so if you're in a Windows platform, try coming over and your MIDI port setup. So you'll go to your studio menu to studio setup and try toggling these settings. So you could say use system timestamp for MIDI's for Windows MIDI ports, use direct device directed music instead. So, try toggling some of these, as some MIDI interfaces don't deal well with, depending on the operating system of how it deals with timestamps. So usually if it's like a 30-second note early, it's something like this. So try toggling these particular settings there. And I think that would take care of it for you if you're on Windows, but let me know if you're not. Okay, PK asks, is there a way to select multiple tracks and color them together? So all you have to do is, as we are here, we'll just say, let's go to, I want to take all these tracks. I'm going to select them all. Make sure that no events are selected. We go to the color icon here and say, I want these all to be the same color. And now they are all the selected color right there. So select your tracks, pick your color, and you can just do it just like that. Okay, So we see from Dan McLean, I'm not sure if this is a feature request or not, but is there a way to see the RMS levels in the mixer for all channels instead of selecting one by one? Thanks. All right, so let me just go to a different project. Okay, so let's I think that we kind of get a rough sense of kind of what's going on. Some people I know will utilize some people will utilize like a supervision on one particular track. So I'm not sure if that's kind of what you're doing, but if we go to, let's say, our analyzer to supervision, so we can say, okay, here we want to see level, and so if we wanted to see different, so let's say we want to see, like CAT System 20, but you could sidechain different inputs into here. And I know it's probably not the best solution, but you could take each track and utilize that. So, but here we can see like the peaks pretty clearly, as well as kind of what the channel volume is, and we could kind of get a sense of what the RMS, if you wanted to see it like on the actual track itself. For media, if you go to audio to statistics, so once you have that kind of set, you can see what your average RMS level is on a particular track. So but there's a lot of things that could obviously adjust that, but I think it probably could be an easier way to do it. So all right, so we see for Kaiwa and Franklin, you just want to point out that if you change the option from velocity to pitch, then you'll see that the notes work in scale. The colors will change for the notes. Yeah, so if you're not familiar with this function, so one of the coloring options in the MIDI editor that you can have is, I will just come over here. Let's generate some data. So if we wanted to look at, we can see our chord track at top here. So let's go to our global tracks and we'll look at our chord track. All right, so now if we change our color scheme from velocity to scale and chords, so now as I move notes here, that we could move notes. Let me just switch this setting here, sorry. So now as we move particular notes, let's go to my scale assistant and we'll say use our chord track for the editor, that you notice that you'll have different colors for notes, and that will show you kind of which notes are within the chords, which notes are out of the chords. So we say, okay, let's make this a F minor chord. We could see that all of these notes are out of the particular chord, and then we can have notes that are in the chord that will be green. So You can have different color schemes to indicate which notes are in key and which are out of key. But, you know, if you don't have to be afraid of having notes out of key. It's totally fine. Okay, so we see from Icy, just says thank you for the reply. Understood. All right. So we have Forward Thinker checking in from Wales. Thanks for being on. All right. Forward Thinker asks, Greg, when I'm trying to gain stage A recording, I set the meters to input, but it doesn't seem to matter to the meter levels when I adjust to pre-gain. How do I get an accurate reading on an input? Well, you could think of the input as actually what's coming off of the source. So if we come over, so this is what's actually playing back. So when we look at, we play this test tone here, and we look at our meters. Okay, and I'll switch the metering position to input. So now as I adjust this, we can see that that is what's actually coming off of the hard disk. So what's playing, so if we come here to our meter, this is affecting it after the input stage. So it's, while it's pre-fader, it's not pre-input. So if I come here, we hear the change, but we're not going to see it because this is what's actually coming from the file and not, so that's the input that's going into the DAW, into Cubase, as opposed to what's being processed after it. So here you may want to, so that's what the intention of the input metering is. It's kind of a true metering input. But if we switch this to, you know, post fader, then we could see those changes. So as we adjust our EQ, then we'll see those changes take effect. And then if we have this panned all the way, if it's on a stereo track, I think we're just on mono, we could see that when we get a post panner. So think of the input meter is what's coming directly off of the file, and that's the input source. So it's not the pre-gain, you know, that's pre going into the channel, but not pre-input. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. See DJ View just says, thanks so much, Greg. All right, you see John Barry just says, cheers, Greg, copy and paste is close enough. All right, Daniela Tocan asks, what is Greg's email? So you can just send, if you want to reach me by email, you can just reach out via clubcubase@steinberg.de. So once again, clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see Henry Fleury just says, that works. Thank you, Greg. So. All right, so I see maybe the second part of Soren's question, but I don't think I see the first part. Let me see, I'll scroll back up for a bit. Yeah, so Soren, I think I see the second part of your question. Just on the continued, so I could play the keyboard on a part with the sampler track only, activate my keyboard on a part to play the sampler track there only. So maybe if you could, maybe it was just too much text, but maybe if you want to ask the question again, we could probably still get to it. Getting a call from Jeff Berlin, my hero bass player. So let me just text him, so I'll call him after. He's why I studied music in college. Great to see Sable Winters on. Glad you can make it. From Bay Area, California. All right, so we see Cycling is Awesome asks, how can I increase the colors? I see colors in your project that I can't find in my projects. So the colors, if you go to your project menu to project colors setup, here you can see lots of different features. So if you wanted it to be the number of colors, you could have 32 colors, 8 colors. You could have number of color tints. So if you wanted to come over here, you could have up to 128 colors if you want to see based on color tints or basic colors. So you can adjust accordingly. And that will be saved in the song. So you could give that a try. Let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see from Jack Zeed about the Windows MIDI port settings. So tried them all. So, try also, if, the one thing you could do is if you hit Alt or Option plus the letter K, you can come up, you see your keyboard here. And, and you could trigger this keyboard by hitting like, QWERTY in your computer keyboard. See if this is functioning and recording correctly for you timing wise, and if that's working, then it's going to be like the particular MIDI device that you're using as your controller. So that's a good control in testing. So open up the virtual keyboard, Alt or Option plus the letter K, and try just recording something and see if that records on time, and that will kind of could rule out a lot of different functions for you. All right, so we see Soren just says strange he had characters left. All right, Forward Thinker asks, in chord tracks I want a chord to show F sharp, but sometimes it'll only display G flat. Can I force a sharp instead of a flat chord? Okay, so let's say if I come here and I want this to be G flat. So I think what you could do is if you select a chord, go to the info line. Here we could say I want it to be G flat or I want it to be F sharp. You can just come over here and you have the Enharmonic shift. You could have it auto, but if you wanted to change it to sharp or flat, we could do so just like that. All right, so we see from Soren, says Greg, in VST Live, how do I automate in VST Live? Can I automate monitor on and off on a certain part? So I can play my MIDI keyboard on a part in the sampler track and activate my keyboard on a part to play the sampler track there only. So I think that once we come over, so let's open up VST Live. Okay, so let's say we'll just okay, so let's say we are looking at our Ghost of the Ocean. So if you wanted to, one of the things that you could do is if you have layers that are set up, you could go to zones, and for each of, if you have like 2 or 3 different instruments that are stacked, here you can set, you want to do split point, you want no layer, you want it to be layered at, specific velocities. So, check out the zones function here. Now, if you want it to go between different tracks, let's go to your devices, to actions and shortcuts. And I think if you go to project, so let's say if you want to go to, so record, stop, and I think if we come over, so if you wanted to record, so a lot of the different options you can see here. So let's say we would go to, this is where we could do like a MIDI learn or type in keyboard shortcuts for different functions. So if you go here to the project, at this point you could see that you want to select different layers, go to the next song, previous song. So this is where you would see kind of all of the different options for functions that could be set up directly for MIDI remote or using or keyboard shortcuts. So again, to get there, so we could go between, if you wanted, you could create, so as we add different instruments that are layered here, so now that we go to zones, we could just say, okay, I want this to be layer 1. I want it to be, between these particular keys. I want but I want the velocity there. Let's get to layer 2. I want layer 2 to be there. Layer 1 to cover all of these keys. So at this point, you could do splits if you wanted to as well, but you could just kind of set up your different layers like that. So whether you want it to be velocity, keyboard ranges, different MIDI CCs to go back and forth. But once you turn that off, you could also set up your different instruments there. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Soren. All right. All right, wonderful to see Peter from Montreal. We hope you're completely over your COVID. Glad that you make it today. Everyone's always happy to see Sable on. All right, so let's get to a couple of the questions that were mailed in. So let me jump over to those. Okay, I just see. All right, so we just see from Dan McLean, how does that help when playing all tracks live? I might have to stop playing back live to check the statistics for each track instead of within the mixer. With it, RMS and peak takes time to do. So I think that, so let's take a look. And so let's come over here to our inserts. Let's just switch projects, jump back and forth easier. So let's say as we're just here, so let's say as we're playing back different tracks, So here we have this level set for RMS. Let me just, and then as you would, so you can do it kind of with supervision. I know that I don't know of a way to make this automatically show. Let me just, yeah, so now if you wanted to just solo tracks, you could do that, or we could choose to sidechain. So if we're here, I want to see my kick. So now I'm just seeing the kick, and let's look at so you could activate sidechain to different inputs as well as another method. So I know it's not super convenient, but all right, so we see Darren Flake just checking in from Canada. All right, so we see Jack Seed says, looks like recording with on-screen keyboard has the same exact problem as when I'm playing with my MIDI keyboard. If the click was delayed by 30-second recording, it should be on point. Thanks again, though. All right, so that's good information to know. So one of the things that you could also do is look at your studio setup. Let's go to the audio system. Check to make sure that like you have adjust for record latency turned on here. And if you have any plugins, and this could be plugins in the master section as well. So if you have something like Sonar Works or something in the control room, that may be also setting up issues for that. So, but make sure that you have, you know, the adjust for record latency just set up there as well. All right, so we have Manuel Ramsier just saying, hey all, so glad you can make it today. All right, so we see Michael Pierce has made it back. And one other thing, Jack Seed, is, you know, if you're, you know, one other thing you do is check if you come over to the very left-hand corner of the transport, try activating the constrained delay compensation and see if that makes a difference as well. All right, so we see Michael Pierce just says, wow, today, daffodils, scientific naming, Roman Empire, Latin, agrobacterium, tumefacians. Sorry, I'm sure I said that wrong. Don't ask. And my question as to why the word nurse in Ukrainian splits into honey sister. Fun 90 minutes. You get to learn all about Ukrainian culture helping out. Okay, so let me jump to a couple of questions that were mailed in. Thanks for all the questions. Again, you could always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. Okay, so we had a question about how to set default velocity values when drawing in MIDI notes. Okay, so, and I think it's usually defaults to a value of 100, but how can we change that? All right, so as we draw in MIDI notes, we see the velocity is conveniently set to 100. So if we wanted to change that value, we see this parameter right here for the insert velocity. So if I wanted to draw in notes and have the velocity, let me just undo my be a different value, I could come right over here and type in, let's say 67. So now as notes are drawn in, the velocity is 67. Now we could have 5 different presets. So if you go to the setup here, we could have kind of a default level, and then we could have like level 2, level 3, 4. So you could have different values for different levels. So if it comes back and you open up the program again, it's set to 100. The next time you open it up, where you can see that these velocities are higher than the 67, you could come over here and adjust the setup and change the default value. So level 1 will be the default. And if you wanted to put in different keyboard shortcuts to change and switch between these 5 different velocity values, you can come over to the key command, and I think it'll be under insert velocity, and then you could have the insert velocity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you could have different key commands from the computer keyboard, or if you wanted to have key commands directly from the MIDI remote, we could have those set up just to trigger that. So if we wanted to do this to toggle the default values from the MIDI remote, we could come over here. Let's jump to this. I'll go to Untitled. So we'll say insert velocity. So we'll say 1, assign it to this key. And do one more. So now as I go to enter in notes and draw them in, I can hit the key here, and now we can put in different values. So, and that's handy for doing quick like drum programming if you wanted different velocity values. So again, to change that, you can change the default just by double clicking in the value there, or you could change it permanently by going to the little icon just to the right and then being able to enter in different default velocity values. Okay, so I had a question. I'm trying to export a MusicXML file from Cubase and import it into Dorco or Sibelius to notate the music. The issue I'm having is if I select the regions I want to export, go to the score editor and export to XML. When I open up the file in Dorco or Sibelius, I don't see any track names. I've tried a couple of options, but right now the only solution that seems to work is to open the score settings, go to staff, and manually add staff names to every track individually. I wish Cubase did this automatically. Any suggestions? So I haven't really found a good solution for this, and just for those that are looking at it, we'll just so as I'm looking at this in our score editor, okay, and we see like the grand here, so our track names. So MusicXML, not everything always is carried over. We just okay, so what we're going to do now is export MusicXML. So we do this within the score editor. call it March 12th, 2024. Okay. And I'm just going to make sure I exported it where I thought I did. Okay, so desktop. All right, so it's open Dorco. Okay, so we'll just do a new project. Yeah, so we don't see the track name there automatically that's added. You know, and it could be some settings. I could check with John Barron on the Dorco team to see if there's any settings, but let me just see if there's... Okay, let's see if it's maybe in layout options, maybe, because I think that there is something in here that might... See if it's under, so it looks like it should... So it looks like that's set to full. Let's see, staff on subsequent systems. Apply. See if that makes any difference. No, it doesn't look like it is. So. Yeah, so it looks like it doesn't carry over. Not everything is obviously carried over in a MusicXML, but I'll do some checking on that with John Barron and see if he has any ideas. Sorry about that. All right, another question we had just says, thanks, I'm trying to save an audio track event with its inserts so I can use it in another project as per your demonstration. However, when I type a name and click OK, absolutely nothing happens. If I try to create a new folder to put the preset in, nothing happens. It just stays with the window open. All right, so let's say I have this vocal file and I have some different processing on it. So I got some EQ, compressor, and I want to save this as a track preset. So what I'm going to do is to right click and we'll say save track preset. I'm going to come here, we'll call it March 12th, 2024 vocal. Okay, then I'm going to hit OK. So now that I've done that, if I go to my MediaBay on the right hand side, we'll go to user presets, to track presets, to audio. And if we come here, we should probably see our March 12th, 2024 vocal. I drag that out to my project. And as we open this up, we'll see the same EQ, the same compressor, and volume control as this channel right above. So when we look at it, so again, to save the track preset, just right click, save track preset, type in a name. You don't necessarily have to put it into a new folder. And then at this point, to find it in the MediaBay, go to User Presets, Track Presets, Audio, and you'll see it right there. And you could just drag and drop to have that preset. All right, let me jump back to live questions. Thanks for sending questions in advance. So you see Jav just asking, will Friday's live stream be at the same time as today's? So yes, we usually do 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. In America, we went daylight saving time this past weekend. I know other European countries will do it towards the end of the month. So it'll be the same time as today. So and you could always, if you go to youtube.com/Cubase like the day before, you'll see the link for it. And that link will have the time for your local time zone where you are. So you can always check the actual link. Okay, Diamond District Studios asks, finding it difficult to produce in Cubase when trying to use loops that either don't import to the tempo, play at a different sample rate, or both. How can I fix it? All right, so if it's playing at a different sample rate, I'll just start with a new project here. Okay, so there is a preference. So if you're taking loops that are in different sample rates, if you go to Editing, to Audio under Preferences, you could say on importing audio files, you could just say convert to project settings. So as you do that, that would automatically convert the file as you're importing it into the correct sample rate and bit depth. So let's say I want to start working with loops. So I will come over here. I'll just put this in like a 16 bar loop roughly. And let's build a song. So there's one little trick you could do to make sure that your loop is playing back in time. So let's say we're going to set our tempo here to 100 beats a minute. All right, so if we put on our metronome. All right, so we will now come over and just find a library here. So let's get to Lo-Fi Dreams. All right, so as we go to select, we can audition. So let's say I just want to find drum beats. All right, so now I can see all my drum beats. So if we have this little option here that says align beats, this will play it to the tempo of the project. So if I change my tempo here to 160 and I audition, it will play back at 160 beats a minute. If I have it at 100 beats a minute and I play, it's going to play back at 100 beats a minute. So with that turned off, so let's say my tempo is now 100 beats a minute. I drag this file in, and as we do this, we may notice that, let's see, okay, so let's say if I drag a different file in, that these files, once we have, let me see if it's this option. So once we have this turned on, let's say the align, that as we drop files in, so I will just come here, let's say we're playing along, and I want to go to 100 beats a minute again, so I'll just type in. And we could choose to align the beats as well. So if we come over, just okay, so I'm going to drop this in, and I just want to copy this a couple times. All right. So we can see that it's in musical mode. So it wasn't in musical mode. It's not going to be aligned to the grid. So let's say I want to find a bass part now from this library. So as I audition, all right, so I'm going to drop that in, and all right, so as we do this, and I'm just going to, now one of the things to be aware of is as we do this, that depending on where your preview volume is, so if we have your preview volume, this volume is automatically extracted over. So let's say we want to do like maybe a little synth part. Okay, so I'm going to drop that in, and let's go ahead and mute the bass part there. So I'm going to just put this in a loop. Sorry. And notice that we could have this automatically kind of follow. So let's come over and put in maybe like a quick keyboard part. So we could just kind of go through your different sounds. Okay, so let's do like maybe a synth comp. And now whenever I want to kind of change the tempo, so let's say I want it slower. So everything that we do just kind of will drop right in. So let's say, okay, now I want it a little faster. Let's say I don't like that at all. Let's make it again about 100. Now let's say now I just want to come over here. Let's throw in some claps. Right, so I could just take that little sample right there and let's just drag it. Now let's just throw in our beat on top. So you could just kind of do this. So just make sure everything is kind of in musical mode. same loop twice. All right, so this. So this way, you know, guys, you just kind of drag and drop stuff in. It's very easy to just automatically have it fit what you want to do. And everything is going to automatically kind of just fall right into place. So Cubase is super easy to do loops. All right. See, Michael Pierce just says on, oh, insert velocity, that's handy. I assume it works in the other MIDI editors as well. Sure does. All right, Terrence Shaw asks, when I bounce MIDI to audio, it ends up a bit behind the beat, and I have to manually nudge it up. It's not a biggie, except when I forget to do so. So what's to fix this, Greg? All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's do F#1 here, and I'll paint in some notes. Let's do maybe eighth notes or quarter notes. Okay, so now all right, let me just see if this plays back as expected. Let's try. Let me see if I need that. Let's do a different project real quick. Hang on. Okay, so now we listen to this. Okay, excuse me. So let's come over here. Let's render this. And we'll make it dry. And let's unmute. So it looks like it's pretty dead on as we're doing this. So make sure that you don't, if you're running third-party plugins, like if they are so see if you those look like they're pretty on with that. So, but let me know if you have any plugins that might be causing a delay in the rendering, or if you just try to enable the constrained delay compensation. All right, so we see from Sable, where is VST Live Pro? I still have Cubase 12 Pro. So VST Live is a different program that's really kind of designed more for live production, live performance production. So it's not part of Cubase. Okay. Sable Winters, great point. What would we do without Jazz Dude? So yeah, well, everyone give special thanks to Jazz Dude for all of his work. All right, and we have Gidkim Music checking in from Nairobi in Kenya. Thanks for joining us. All right, Darren Flake asks, hi Greg, how to offset the project latency manually in the mixer when adding heavy latency plugins loaded? So it's automatically compensated on playback of any of your audio. So Cubase will have full delay compensation. So you don't have to manually do it. So it's automatically done. It's if you're recording directly into Cubase, and you have a bunch of plugins live, that's why you could use the actual constrained delay compensation. So there's nothing that we can't offset stuff, we can't offset playback of items before it comes in, just physics. But at that point, for anything that's actually that's recorded will automatically be compensated for, so you don't have to worry about it. So we see from Jay and Kana says, perfect. I'm totally convinced by Cubase being the best DAW, and having these kind of support from you just further reassures my decisions. Thank you, Greg. Thanks for the kind words. All right, so we see question, any hope of having folders in the mixer in the near future? So it may not be like visual folders that we see in the mixer, but there are kind of folder access. So let's say if we go here and we look at the mix for this particular track, and if we go to the visibility tab in the mixer, you can just come over here. So let's say we have a folder of all of our drums. So if I want to only see the drums, we could do that. We could also see all of our tracks in the mix console. So if we wanted to hide the folder, we could just click right there in the visibility tab, and we could do that also for the lower screen. So if we come over here and go to our visibility, we could say hide our folders right there. So I think that kind of gets you to the same spot in the long run, and you could just say, okay, I don't want to see any of these channels. I want to see only folders. I want to come here. I have everything. Now if I hold down shift and click, I could only see this particular folder or another folder. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, the artist known as Love wants everyone to please hit the like button. All All right, we see Michael Teams is granted stable 1 gallon of pistachio mint ice cream. Michael Pierce just says Groove Agent is such a handy thing to have built in. It's in so many of my mixes / edits. All right, so we see from QTracks 100, Greg saved me days of manual editing last time I came on the live stream. I want to say thanks to Greg and the Cubase team. Well, thanks for letting us know, and we're glad that you're on the live stream and it was helpful for you. Great, so I think we're at the end of questions. We'll see if there's more questions that sneak in. I see Jazzy has great points. It says, if you guys ever listen to all the GM presets in Howie Sonic and just stack them for better sound out of the box, they might really be boring, but add some effects and you won't believe it's simple stock stuff. Yeah, so a lot of the content that we see in Howie and Sonic is actually, done with Yamaha in conjunction with them. So they've obviously been doing keyboards for a super long time. All right, let's see if there's any more questions sneaking in. It's a nice spring day for a lot of people in the northern hemisphere. We're finally having some better weather. We know that it's time zone changes. All right. See, Michael Pierce just says, I think people actually do forget about stacking library slash patches. Can be extremely powerful. And I think, one of the things that you'll notice is that Howie and Sonic is perfect for stacking. So let's say if I just want to do in the old days, the MIDI used to be like, oh, give me a $25,000 sound, which meant you just layered, like $25,000 worth of instruments together to get a sound that no one else could or could afford at the time. But it's like super powerful. So let's come over here and say, okay, let's start off with a piano. So we'll say, okay, I want to go to just kind of a piano sound, so pretty common sounding piano. So now let's say we want to layer different sounds. So I want maybe a organ sound. So let's pop over here. Let's go to, and we could just categorize everything here. So let's just say, okay, we want organ and we want it an electric organ. So let's say we'll do this for Michael Pierce. So as we're over here, so now on channel 2 we have an organ patch. So when we go to MIDI, I could just switch this all to channel 1 and I could layer the sound. So let's come over to our mix. And let's say, I remember hearing multi-tracks of some Dire Straits stuff when I was at Mark Knopfler's studio once. So, and his trick was always layering an accordion with a so let's come over here, let's layer an accordion in and put this on the same MIDI channel. So we could just say, okay, let's come over here and I want this to be down in the mix. And let's knock it up an octave. So we go to our MIDI, we could say, let's just transpose this. And now it's up an octave. Let's just get to the mix. And let's put in maybe like a synth patch as well. So we'll come over and let's do like an FM pad sound. So as we come over, let's just Alright, so we'll come over to synth pad and we'll say digital. And again, we just come over here to our MIDI, layer it up. And we haven't even like started putting effects on. So if we wanted to come over and just say, okay, let's go to our effects, and we wanted this to be a reverb, and then so we'll just put a reverence, and let's put a delay on here. So now as we go to our mix, we could just say, okay. So it's super easy, and that's just, you know, you load up 16 different instruments with different effects. You could also do different split points. So if you say, okay, I only want this this particular patch, like the accordion to come in on lower notes. You can just make super thick sounds. So I mean, Enharmonic is a wonderful tool for creating synth layers, so spend time with that and just layer up different things. So okay, so we see Loic just saying it's bad weather in France. Well, thanks for making it on bad weather day. All right, so we see from Diamond District Studios, can you live strum notes when using chord pads? Okay, so let's come back to this instrument track here, and I'll just change, let's load up a sound. Okay, so we're going to come and let's open this up. So we'll layer this to our Enharmonic. I'll just add a new instrument. Okay, so let's say we want to do like a guitar. I'll just search for nylon guitar. Right, so one of the cool things that you could do with the chord pads, so, you know, a lot of times we could treat, we look at the chord pads, and we could switch this to be guitar player, so we could do guitar voicings. So that the E is the lowest note, as it is on a guitar if you play between an E and a D chord. But we could also have different player presets. So let's go to patterns. And as we want to come over here to patterns, we'll go to our factory presets. So we can see that you're going to have guitar patterns. So let's say, okay, I want to have, we'll do just a little like samba guitar. So now as we So if I wanted to just record this, we can just come over. And now it's actually, when we look at the MIDI data there, it's actually just sequenced all the particular notes of the guitar. So it's not just doing like generic guitar scrubbing, you know, like patterns. It's actually generating and triggering real guitar patterns, and you could take your own patterns and drag and drop them in as well. All right, wonderful to have Neil Conway on. All right, so Michael Pierce just says, awesome enough to have a felt piano included with verb, and layering could be super handy when using subtly. When used subtly, that Michael Pierce likes subtle. All right. See if there's any more questions. If not, we'll wrap up just a couple minutes early. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you have hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And again, we do this on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So maybe an hour off until all countries are kind of synchronized with daylight saving time. But starting today, but you could check the YouTube link to find out exactly when we'll start. Give it another minute or two and see if there's any other questions. If not, we could wrap up. And if you want to send questions in advance, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see from Jack Seed or Jaxed. Thanks for the live stream. And John Barry just says, thanks a lot, Greg. Always learn something new here. That's great. I usually learn new things on live streams as well. All right. All right, so we see Capital Razor and Loic just saying thanks. Jazz Dude saying it's a great point. Quadraphonic is the best sound for limited money. So I know most film composers are do everything in quad. We also want to give a special thanks to the Best Sound Design Oscar last night, or 2 nights ago, went to a project done in Nuendo, and Ludwig Göransson won his Oscar for Oppenheimer. So it's great to have 2 Oscar wins and using from Steinberg, people using Steinberg solutions. All right, so we see Sable just as Greg says, VST Live Pro and Ableton Live competitor. I think it does a bit more for kind of like the production, being able to send like your lyrics and chord charts to an iPad or your phone. It also controls lighting. So, you know, it does quite a bit more for kind of the production. I don't really use Live, but I think it's more for more DJ style stuff is my impression. I could be wrong. I'm not pretty ignorant about it, but I think it's more kind of DJ production versus kind of like a full concert production. So we just see Michael Pierce says Oppenheimer was Nuendo. Awesome. So I think it was the other project I won for Best Sound, but it was Ludwig did everything in Cubase. So he's a Cubase user, and if you go watch videos on him in all right, so I may have just gotten a quick question in. We can see if we could get this in now. Let me see if I can get the email. Okay, so we see from Mads, just email, it says, if I set the input of a track to all channels and press the chord pads, in playing chords mode, the incoming notes are in different channels, which is what I want, but if the chord pads to pattern mode, they come in on only one channel only. How do I get pattern mode to output to different channels? So I'm not sure if the patterns themselves have different, so let's take a look and see. So I'm going to create just a quick pattern here. And let's change some of the MIDI channels on devices. So let's say I want these all to be MIDI channel 3. Let's make these MIDI channel 2. And let's make these MIDI channel 1. All right. So let's go to our chord pads. And I'm going to just drop this pattern in. And I don't have this mapped across different patterns, but let's take a look at what is generated. Let's look at it in the list editor, see if everything is there, because I think we're just triggering the pattern, but let's see if it looks like it's all, it looks like maybe the patterns might be just split to, might be just on one particular MIDI channel. All right, just jump back. Sorry about that. All right, see Peter just says, thanks Greg for being so generous with your time. So you're welcome. All right, thanks for the kind words, Gerald. All right, great to see Brian Sawyer, Senior from Beulahville, North Carolina. Hope you're well. All right, Sable Winters just says, Greg, please demo how to create a power drum kit track, about 2 bars. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's just do a quick drum, like a power drum. So we'll use something like a stock drum kit. Not sure why I have this drum loop playing. Let me just. Anyway, so all right, so let's take a look here. You know, sometimes drums, as you're working with them, you know, what could be helpful is, you know, to make sure everything has enough sound, enough space to kind of make the particular sound. So let's come over here. All right, so I'll just do kind of my generic. Okay, so say, well, not sure why I have a drum loop playing in the background, but we'll try to ignore it, sorry. And I'll just kind of slow down their tempo a little bit. You know, some people will take a hand clap and put it on every snare just to kind of layer different snares. Or if you wanted to put rim shots on, and let's say I want a different snare on different kits here. Okay, so let's just come over here. Let's say I want to layer the side stick on every other snare hit. So, like, you know, being able to kind of layer some different aspects together as well. But let's say I wanted to just take this particular kit and let's go to the mixer. And as, let's say I just wanted to run the entire kit through a plugin, we'll come over here to dynamics and the envelope shaper. So you could use kind of the envelope shaper if you want it to be very tight, or just kind of use that to kind of like the release time to kind of get like big, huge sounding drums. That's a great way to go as well. So give that a try, Sable. So try layering different things together as well. All right, we see John Koskian just thanking everyone. So it's always great to have you on, John. I hope we can make it to the next Zoom social meetup. All right, let me just make sure I'm not missing. Okay, so we see from inactive user, how can I delete my marked time section above my tracks, like the little triangles to make a cycle? I want to delete that. So what that could be is, as we're working with that, is they might be punch points. So go to your transport, and so if we want to set up punch points, so you may see, let me just put, so go to transport, punch points, and we say set punch points to those. So if you see like those little triangles, and this will allow you to have kind of a range selection that's independent of the punch point. So we can say, okay, we need to punch in and out on this middle bar right here. This is where we need to do the punch, but I want to have a measure play after, a measure play before for the performer. So go to transport, and you could just say you want to, and you could hit I and O, and that will get rid of the punch points showing up visually there. So try hitting I and O, but let me know if that was what you saw, the triangles. All right, so we have Phil Bartlett just saying hi from Oz. Thanks for joining us. It's very early there. Okay, so Phil asks, hi Greg, apparently 13 has issues with sounds cutting out. It started with me. I play trumpet instrument and 3 of the 6 sounds don't play. If you want to, if you have a particular project, please feel free to share it to me if you want to send me a project. Someone else mentioned it in a previous live stream. I think Soren mentioned it after he was editing that the MIDI cut out and then it wasn't for him. So I wonder if if you have a project file that you want to share with me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it and see if there's any MIDI messages that might be causing it. As we see, and Phil also mentions lots of forums stating this is a real issue with 13. But yeah, if you have a particular project that you find it on, please feel free to share it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see from Phil Bartlett, just how do I do that? So again, clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, so we see Sable. I just see a comment from Sable about Greg, see my question. So I think we just went through the drums. Let me see if there's any other question that I missed. So again, try layering different sources. Try to give enough space and try to use some of the different processing for making big drums. And with hi-hats, it's always good to just have variations in velocity. Okay, so you just see maybe Phil Bartlett. You see Jazz Dude asking if it's contact libraries or not, and you see 3 thumbs up, but maybe that's just to me. But yeah, so let me know if Phil, if you're running into the issue, if you see it with a instrument like Sonic versus a third-party instrument as well. So. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions. Okay, and Soren just says, I think the issue with Sonic stopping sounding has to do with pitch bend on instruments that don't like it, and editing, like a classic piano doesn't like pitch bend, and then editing, I think. Okay. So generally, I've found Cubase to be a bit maybe too lenient on applying pitch bend to different instruments. It's really up to how the instrument supports it, but I haven't really run into problems with Sonic with that. All right. So we see Phil Bartlett just says it is contact. So, try taking that same part and playing it back through, Phil, play it back through like a Sonic instrument and see if you get the same result. Play it back through different company instruments and see if it's going to be related, strictly to contact or different, or if it's just a particular problem as well. You just see another comment from Phil. It says also delays with Sonic I noticed yesterday. So if it's a delay, like when you're playing notes in, or if it's a delay. Phil says he's Had 13 for 3 months, but no issues until yesterday. So yeah, let me know if it's in every project or maybe it's specific to a particular project as well, Phil. But again, please feel free to share your project to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I don't have contact on this computer, but I have it on my personal studio computer. I don't really use it a lot, but if it's going to be isolated to one particular company's instruments, that might help us to isolate the issue. All right, we'll see if there's any more comments or questions that come in. If not, we'll wrap up. Okay, see, Phil will send a file, so thanks for doing that. And if you want to just, like in the file, whether it's in the notes, if you have like a particular library or instrument that you find it's kind of misbehaving with, let us know. So as much details as you can, but try in different instruments and see. All right, so it looks like we are maybe out of questions. I'll wait another 10 or 20 seconds and we'll see. If not, then we'll wrap up. All right, so we have Steve just says I was getting an infinite shutdown, stall problems recently, but it seems to have cleared. That's good. It's always a bummer if something like that happens. All right, so I guess we are out of questions. Thank you everyone for learning more about Steinberg products. Appreciate everyone taking part of your early morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night, wherever you are, for joining and learning more about Steinberg products. So again, we'll be doing this starting in 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, which may be different than other countries depending on daylight saving time. You see Phil Bartlett just saying, come to Australia, Greg. So I did get to go to Australia. It was my favorite country I visited. So I got to go to Melbourne and Sydney and up to Wangaratta to visit a friend. So beautiful country. I so enjoyed my time there. So I would go to Australia in a heartbeat for doing a Steinberg demo. But with that, we will go ahead and wrap up, and we'll hopefully see everyone back on Friday. And again, you can send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Thanks for all the great questions, and everyone please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Thank you very much. Goodbye.